So I'm Joel Horowitz, IBM. You'll probably hear a lot of jargon this week. In fact, I'm for sure going to be guilty of that in the next 5 seconds or 5 minutes. And you hear things like AI, you hear things like data science, you hear things like big data, you hear all of these different keywords. And I think where, at least in my mind, I've landed on is the idea of cognitive and the idea of distributed systems. If you look at what's going on, I would say starting with Hadoop back in 2010, we're kind of witnessing the emergence of distributed systems. Distributed data systems, distributed intelligence systems, and distributed people systems, right? If you look at what Alexia has managed to do, pulling all of us together, in fact, Salesforce and IBM, all of us kind of as a community tackling this problem, it's pretty interesting. So just this month, MIT Technology Review came out with their top 10 breakthrough technologies of 2017 for the next decade. And what's interesting is that, well, that's interesting. So this is going to be fun. So when they flipped the slides over, it didn't work. So anyways, this was supposed to highlight the top 5, which I guess you can kind of see. So 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10. I would argue are related to cognitive or AI in some way. And so it's really interesting because, had you looked back, it would have been nanotechnology, it would have been maybe DNA or biotechnology. But now you're seeing like most tech is kind of converging, I would say, on distributed or cognitive systems, right? So if you look at, self-driving trucks, right, that's a big one. If any of you have ever driven on the freeway or the highway, you see a lot of trucks, of course, so that's kind of a big industry. 2, like paying, paying with your face. So right now you pay with your finger, but pretty soon, using your own face to pay for something. Obviously, that requires a cognitive system. Quantum computers. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, how does that have anything to do with AI or cognitive? So quantum computing is really interesting because if you look at what machine learning and what AI really requires is massive compute power, right? And so quantum computing is kind of entering the scene, driven by Intel, Google, and IBM, of course. We're doing a ton of research in this area. We actually just released a way for you yourselves to use quantum computers yourselves through IBM Bluemix, which is pretty cool. So come find us. We're upstairs if you want to learn more about that. And then botnets. Botnets are chatbots, customer service bots. Really interesting. So again, those are cognitive systems. And then reinforcement learning, which is how Google, won Go, right? The game Go. And that's kind of becoming a new trend, I guess you can say, in machine learning and cognitive systems as well. So we're living in a really, interesting age where machine learning and AI and these systems are all starting to have a pretty dramatic effect on technology in general. So, I talk about this in the context of business. So, IBM, has been around for some time, and what we're seeing today, really in this era, is the transformation of business with cognitive systems. So it's really exciting, I think, for all of you to be, part of this situation right now. So, just a little spiel on IBM. We've seen frankly, through a lot of transformations, whether it's, through, and we've pivoted in response, right, to these transformations. So to kind of give you an idea of what's happening, so what's driving this? It's not just that, there's new innovations and new technologies. It's kind of a perfect storm of things happening, right? Machine learning has been around for a long time. It's been around, in fact, IBM was certainly one of the main research groups behind machine learning. In fact, we coined the term machine learning. I'm not sure if you know that. But, so it's been around a long time. But only until recently have we started digitizing all of these business processes, right? For the longest time, it was very paper-based. In fact, many industries are still very paper-based. So what we're doing, to a large degree, is investing in new technologies that can convert a lot of these paper-based processes to digital, right? And what that's doing is causing a massive amount of, massive amount of data exhaust, as you might want to call it, created. That's creating, a really, really interesting opportunity. I'm not going to go through all of these because I only have a little bit of time. So kind of stepping through, of course, we've been involved with a lot of, transformational technologies over the years, from the punch card to storage to personal computers to e-business and to open source Linux, right? And then most recently, IBM Watson as well as Spark Technology Center. So I have a special place in my heart for Apache Spark. I think it's one of the most interesting, breakthrough, and underrepresented technologies of our time. A lot of people look at, it's just it's Hadoop 2.0. I don't see it that way. I think what Spark is really doing is lowering the barrier to entry for a lot of developers to work within distributed systems. So I was part of that launch a couple of years ago. We have a massive group of Spark technology developers here in San Francisco. So if you want to get involved in Spark, come talk to me, and I'll connect you with that center. And so, where I see us going, forward is really in this era of cognitive systems, and I can try to define that a little bit better. But it doesn't just include AI. I think AI is a killer app for cognitive systems. It also includes blockchain. So I don't know how many of you, were reading the New York Times over the weekend, but IBM announced that we're part of the Hyperledger group, which is that is also another distributed system, right? So if you think about blockchain and think about transactions and and those happening in a distributed manner as well. So what I like to talk about is ecosystems and developers and technology platforms. So the way I look at it, IBM introduced one of the first kind of operating systems early on, which was System 360. And that introduced one of the earliest operating systems that people could actually build once and use in multiple systems. What came later was, of course, our investment in Linux. And I'm going a little bit fast because I'm going to run out of time. And again, this introduced the concept of computer science. In my mind, this is what's kind of led to kind of the whole internet economy and application economy. And where I think we're at now is really with Spark, is this idea of this is kind of becoming a standard operating system for people to build data and analytic applications. And I actually think this is accelerating data science significantly. So just to you with this, I don't know if you saw this chart, but this came out from Crunchbase, or not Crunchbase, but CB Insights, and it was really interesting. And so you can see that sitting here in San Francisco, there's a ton of innovation happening in the startup landscape. So if any of you happen to be entrepreneurs yourself, this is a great time to be thinking about AI and cognitive. There's a lot of resources at your disposal. Make friends with Alexi over here. He has a lot of contacts that are doing some pretty awesome things. And so what you can see is that there's a ton of things going on here. It's growing rapidly. There's a ton of investment pouring in. There's a lot of these larger companies, IBM included, are open sourcing their technologies. I mean, even Apple, right, who's been known to not share their research, is now publishing research papers and opening up their technology for all of you to use. So we're living in a very amazing time for all of you to be participating in AI. So I'll leave you with that. There's some links here. I know it's really hard to look at. I'll ask Alexi to push or send this deck out so you can all use it. But there's a lot of places to get started with IBM. Head over to Spark TC if you want to learn more about Spark. We're launching this Cognitive Builder Fair starting in Seattle at the end of this month, March 24th, and then here in San Francisco in April. We're going to bring a lot of different really cool applications together for you to test and build and use. We also have what's called the Global Entrepreneurship Program, which will give you free credits to use the Watson Developer Cloud, to use the data science experience, so that you yourselves don't have to worry about spending a lot of money to get started. And so finally, you can reach me at my Twitter handle at JS Horowitz, or send me an email. I'm around. Thanks for your time.